This is the chair of the Wisconsin Democratic Party, WisDems.org, WisDems.org is the website. Ben Wikler, and Ben, BenWikler on Twitter, and WisDems on Twitter. Ben, welcome back to the program. You know, I have known you for, I think, a decade or longer, and have always been impressed by you and your political acumen, and have been watching your career now as chair of the Wisconsin Democratic Party, and I'm just so impressed by the work you're doing. I just wanted to tip my hat to you before we even began the conversation. Tell us about this Wisconsin Supreme Court race tomorrow and why people all across the country should be concerned about this.
Absolutely, and that's very kind of you to say, Tom. I appreciate it. I am joining you now from Wisconsin, the only state in the country where 4 of the last 6 presidential races has come down to less than 1 percentage point. And what happens tomorrow is that Wisconsin voters will choose the 2 general election nominees for a state Supreme Court race to determine who will fill the tip the balance open seat on our state Supreme Court. Whoever wins that race, the general elections April 4th, will cast the deciding vote in every critical judicial decision that shapes voting rights, that shapes abortion freedoms, that shapes whether the 2024 election result will be certified properly or not. All of those decisions hang on what happens 6 weeks and 1 day from now. And all of that is connected to what happens tomorrow. Wisconsin is the state that has to be won by whoever wants to get to the White House. It is the state that put Trump over the top in 2016. It's the state that put Biden over the top in 2020. It is in both parties' crosshairs in 2024. And tomorrow we will narrow from a 4-candidate field in the primary to 1 progressive and 1 conservative, hyper-conservative, ultra-mega conservative. We know that both of the Republicans running in this race will do just about anything to cement Republican power in defiance of democracy. And so really, this is the starting gun for the most important election of 2023, and it's all hands on deck.
Yeah, tomorrow is the primary, and then the general is in April. I'm sorry, I had thought that this was the general election. That's why I wanted to get you on. I'm a little out of touch with, individual state races, but the Wisconsin Supreme Court has involved itself in some very, very consequential decisions, some of which have national import. Can you tell us about what might be the stakes for Wisconsin and how, as precedent, that may echo nationally?
Absolutely. I mean, it's most people, even in Wisconsin, aren't aware of the election dates, of what's going on, the stakes in this race. I call this the most important election nobody's ever heard of, right? Because turnout plummets in these spring elections. They're nonpartisan officially. There's no D or R next to the candidates' names. And yet the consequences for everything political and really everything in life are hard to overstate. Let's start with abortion. Wisconsin has a law that was passed in the year 1849, before women could vote, before the invention of modern medicine, that makes performing an abortion a felony punishable by 6 years in prison. And it's not clear whether that law is enforceable today. And until it's clear, no hospital in Wisconsin, no clinic is providing abortion care, even when it's care for a miscarriage that could not possibly lead to a pregnancy, because this incredibly antiquated law might be in effect and people might be prosecuted. The state Supreme Court will decide whether this abortion ban should be enforceable or whether it has been invalidated by subsequent laws that passed. So this election will determine the future of reproductive freedom in the state of Wisconsin. That's, for starters, maybe the most personal issue, the issue that will motivate the most voters in the race this April. It will echo for years to come. But for the rest of the country, the bigger spotlight might be on the stakes for democracy. Our state Supreme Court ruled last year that to deliver a relative's absentee ballot, or to use that should be a crime, that to use a drop box should be illegal. All the drop boxes were removed for absentee ballots in our state, not because our legislature passed a law that our governor signed. Our governor would have vetoed a law like that, but because the state Supreme Court decided to make up these new rules out of whole cloth after decades in which drop boxes were used to deliver absentee ballots. Our state Supreme Court looked at the redistricting situation. The right-wing legislature had proposed ultra-gerrymandered maps. Our Democratic governor vetoed the Republicans' proposal, proposed fair maps. The state Supreme Court just chose the most gerrymandered maps in the country, We're a 50-50 state. 6 out of 8 congressional seats are held by Republicans. And almost 2/3, a near supermajority of our state legislative seats are held by Republicans because the maps are rigged. What this means is that once we have a new Supreme Court, if a progressive wins, they could declare these unconstitutional district lines unconstitutional. This happened in Pennsylvania before. We could have new maps drawn in the state of Wisconsin. That could mean, even if it's just a 50-50 year, like so many years are in Wisconsin, 2 more House seats for Democrats in the U.S. Congress. It could mean a shot for Democrats to actually win majorities in the state legislature. Cases around union organizing. Our current state, the partisan Republican majority in our state Supreme Court upheld our former Governor Scott Walker's attacks on unions, Act 10, which hammered public sector unions, then right to work laws. Those could be vulnerable to constitutional challenge in our state. We could restore the right to work. And if not now, then once we win majorities in the state legislature, we could do it legislatively. So much progress is possible. But if we don't win, we are stuck in a doom loop where Republicans choose their own district lines to guarantee their reelection. And then the state Supreme Court rubber stamps those maps so that no matter how infuriated the public becomes about Republican corruption, Republican perfidy, Republican attacks on the idea of democracy, there's no recourse for voters because the district lines are drawn in a way that guarantees that Republicans will have a hammerlock on our state legislature, the state budget, and the state lawmaking process.
Yeah,
those are the stakes.
Yeah, you mean restore the right to unionize, right? Rather
Absolutely.
Than the right to work
that's
for
what,
less.
That's what could happen.
And boy, it's been a while since I've heard anybody use the word perfidy. Good on you, Ben. Who are the behind-the-scenes players here? I'm guessing that the progressive nominee will probably have a lot of support. You're not sure who that's going to be right now?
Well, there's 2. There's Janet Protasewicz and Everett Mitchell. Either of them would be a night and day, a day and night improvement over what we see from the Republicans right now. Right. Our state party, our constitution, we're neutral between those 2 primary candidates, and we're encouraging folks to go out and vote for either one.
Okay.
But I can tell you who's behind the Republican side in this field.
Great, go for it.
It's a kind of scary roster. So there are 3 names I want to highlight in particular. The first one is Richard Uihlein. Richard and his wife, Liz Uihlein, are the biggest Republican donors in the country. They were the biggest funders of the Stop the Steal rally right before the January 6th insurrection. And they, through a super PAC, have declared that they're going to spend millions of dollars, particularly to put Dan Kelly, one of the 2 Republican candidates in this race, on the Supreme Court. They've already spent $1.5 million, but that's just a down payment. The second one is Diane Hendricks. Diane Hendricks is the wealthiest self-made woman in the country. She runs ABC Home. She's an ultra MAGA Republican donor. She has also just started pouring money into the race. Diane Hendricks and Richard Uihlein put $29 million into the race to reelect Ron Johnson. They're the reason why Ron Johnson won by 1 percentage point in 2022, even though he was so profoundly unpopular through a smear campaign orchestrated by the guy who did Swift Boat Veterans for Truth and now is running Donald Trump's campaign. That was all funded by those 2 billionaires. And the third name, even scarier than the other 2, is Leonard Leo, the architect of the Federalist Society's strategy to basically rig the whole court system, starting with the Supreme Court on down. He personally donated $20,000 just in the last week to Dan Kelly, one of these Republican candidates. It's pretty clear that the whole Federalist Society donor network, Leonard Leo controls more than $1 billion that was handed to him by a Republican mega donor, and the Uihlein and Hendricks special interest money will come crashing in. So this is going to be a contest of democracy and people power and the rule of law and all the things that we're supposed to stand for in this country against the money power, against an attempt to rig our judicial system to lock in small d democratic power in the state that tips national power.
We're talking
That's what's at stake here, and we see the other side coming right at us.
I get it. We're talking with Ben Wikler, the chair of the Wisconsin Democratic Party. WisDems.org is the website. Ben, last question here. We're running out of time. What can people who are not in Wisconsin, obviously if you're in Wisconsin, make sure that your voter registration is up to date and show up both for the primary and for the general election in April. But what can people who are outside Wisconsin do to help?
We need your time, your treasure, and your talent. go to WisDems.org/phone bank, and you can sign up for our volunteer phone banks. They happen pretty much every day. We need calls in to make sure that people who share our values turn out and vote in this election. They're grateful for your calls. You're not annoying people right now. Most people don't know this race is happening. WisDems.org/volunteer and WisDems.org/donate. We're allowed to provide unlimited support to our candidate in the general election through the party. So we'll be running a massive get out the vote program, voter protection program, communications operation. Please do chip in. Your dollars can go further in this race than just about any other political context, because this race tips the court, that tips the state, that tips the country.
You said that the race is nonpartisan, and yet there's a primary, and you're expecting basically a Republican and a Democrat to come out of this. How does that work?
So essentially, the work of the party, the work of also the Republicans working on this race, the work of the candidates has been to communicate with voters about their values. So at this point, we can tell from our polling, but progressive voters are going to vote for either the two progressive candidates. Conservatives will vote for either the two conservative candidates. It's like two sides of a piece of pizza. Mm-hmm. And as long as one or the other or both of the sides isn't completely perfect, it has at least some margin between the winner and the loser, you wind up with one progressive and one conservative, just running through the math. So we're confident it'll be one from each lane. But then in the general election, it becomes this arm wrestling match in a state that is almost perfectly balanced on a knife's edge to figure out who wins. There were two elections that came down to less than half a percentage point for state Supreme Court over the last 12 years. This could be that close, one vote per precinct. So this is a moment when every dollar and every phone call could actually win the election.
So get thee over to WisDems, WisDems.org, and /volunteer/donate/whatever, and or just check it from the main menu, I'm assuming, Ben. Ben Wikler, the chair of the Wisconsin Democratic Party. Keep up the great work, Ben. Great having you with us. Thank you.